Hi there, I'm Tom Field, Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. It's entitled, What's Hiding in Your DNS and Other Traffic? Your presenters today joining me with this session are Michael Morris, Director of Business Development and Technology Alliances with Endace, Gordon Beith, Senior Director of Product Marketing with Gigamon, and Ed Smith, Senior Product Marketing Manager with Corelight. But before I turn this over to the trio, let me give you a little bit of background on what they're going to talk about with you today. Are you plugged into the growth of DNS traffic and other internet traffic as a transport for cyber attacks? You're going to find out how the right security stack can help you find and resolve these challenging threats with Ed Smith, Gordon Beith, Michael Morris. They're going to give you an eye-opening session here where you'll learn how to accelerate and streamline investigations by deploying components that enable network-wide visibility, how to help your security team to evolve from reactive response to proactive threat hunting, and finally, you'll tackle a real DNS-based threat that can be quickly identified and contained with the help of Gigamon, Corelight, and Endace. Now, we're going to start to meet our panelists today. Up first, you're going to hear from Michael Morris. He leads Business Development and Technology Alliances at Endace, where he's responsible for building an ecosystem with strategic vendors to provide customers with easy workflows and flexibility to leverage its network history platform. Gordon Beith, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Gigamon, has got more than 30 years experience in telecommunications product management, marketing, hardware, and software development, as well as related next-generation services areas. And then finally, Ed Smith is a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Corelight. He's got 7 years experience working in the cybersecurity industry, representing identity as a service, DevOps, and vulnerability management solutions, including his most recent roles as Director of Marketing at Cloud Passage and Senior Product Marketing Manager at Tripwire. Gentlemen, with that, I'd like to turn this over to you for your session today, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Tom. Well, as you mentioned, we really want to get into some of the intricacies of what's happening in hiding in various common network protocols. For our agenda today, we want to start with really addressing some of the key challenges that we know many SecOps teams are facing. We want to look at some of the nuances of how threats can be hidden in various traffic, like DNS. And we want to talk about some approaches to address those challenges, some key pillars we believe you need in place to really help you resolve these problems. And then we'll walk through in a little more detail the components that can make it real for you, ultimately giving you the tools and the ability to solve complex hidden threats quickly. So with that, let's start with some of the real key challenges. We know everybody is facing just tremendously high volumes of alarms. They call it alert fatigue. 3 out of 4 organizations we've talked to really have this as a significant issue for their organization. Not only is the volume a problem, but then the lack of tool integrations and tool fatigue, too many different tools, too many tools to learn, really make it challenging for their operations teams to work together and to share data to really get through things quicker. And the final big issue is threats are getting more complex, and your basic tools, your firewalls, your IPSs and IDSs aren't necessarily catching everything at the beginning. And tools are getting more sophisticated and having multiple layers, where the dwell time of threats inside a cyber network lasts much longer. So giving threat actors a chance to traverse and scout through the network to really have a bigger and broader impact. Ultimately, you need a more effective way to get through these challenges. So in the big picture, it's like trying to find a needle in the haystack, and that's hard no matter what. Attackers are getting more sophisticated. The lack of visibility into various protocols and with various large amounts of traffic being encrypted makes it really hard to solve some of these problems. Lack of shared data, and ultimately data being gone too quickly, gone before you can fully investigate and fully look through all the details needed to ultimately solve a problem. And still, there's a lot of department silos that exist, limiting analysts to be able to communicate and get through information that maybe another department might have, but not in a timely and effective manner to ultimately find that needle in the haystack issue. There's also human limitations. I mean, there becomes a math problem at the beginning of this where we're hearing, and studies are showing that there's many SOCs are facing as many as 10,000 alarms a day. And if you consider that most SOCs have between 2 and 10 analysts, you're looking at 1,000 alerts per analyst. They're having to get through 2 alerts per minute. That's just not realistically possible. And so the sheer numbers in many cases make it unsustainable. But then you compound that with shortage of really high skilled staff that can find and dig through details quickly, make those connections of complex threats, and really find those details that are hard to find in various tools and systems. Then you've now got a remote staff challenge where people aren't working together. And so they're having to work on Zoom calls or GoToMeetings or WebExes and solve these problems over virtualized environments. And ultimately, there's complex business processes and workflows that each organization has and needs to integrate with their other tools and systems. So many of these alarms simply just aren't being addressed and aren't being fully investigated. And let's talk through a little bit of the complexity of a specific threat. And this is a little bit older example, but it's really a perfect example. The Indestroyer malware that came out a few years ago, initially infection by an email. That initial infection took obviously only minutes to get through and be opened by the email user. But then that kicked off a series of other events where primary and secondary backdoors were connected to the threat actors. There was additional payload components that did additional destructive activities. Then the malware went into what was called reconnaissance mode, where literally for weeks or even months, it was scanning entire infrastructures looking for PLCs and RTU controllers. And this is dwell time, where had the analysts in this environment been able to see some of these indicators and be able to connect the dots, they could have maybe solved this threat much quicker. Then ultimately, the destructive phase, again, minutes or hours, where it started shutting down systems and ultimately covering its tracks with various wipers, again, making it really difficult to go back and see how far and wide it went. So with those as examples, let me turn it over to Ed and let Ed walk through some of the complexities of finding threats in DNS traffic. Ed?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so now I'd like to dig a little bit deeper and take a look at DNS traffic specifically. A lot of what I'm going to talk about applies to other traffic, other types of network traffic. So we'll just look at DNS as an example here. This is actually a very popular question and a use case for Corelight customers, and that's, how do I find attacks that are hidden in DNS traffic? So let's start off by taking a look at the DNS protocol itself. Why is it such an attractive target for attackers? The answer is it's a great hiding place. I mean, first off, DNS is almost everywhere that you'll find an internet connection. It's pretty much the backbone of the internet, and without it, pretty much any application or website or network service is going to stop working. So since it's such an important service, it's almost never blocked at the firewall. So if you're an attacker, this is a pretty reliable channel that you can use for outbound communication to the public internet. So for an attacker, if they know if this box is connected to the net, they know they can get access to DNS. So what are they going to use it for? One example would be command and control, or C2. Once they've got their malware installed on your network, they can then issue commands to that malware over DNS and do additional bad things. Another example would be data exfiltration. So using DNS to send confidential data back to an attacker, but hiding that traffic in a place where most people aren't even looking for data exfiltration. And then even when you do have people or organizations that are looking for exfil or C2 and DNS, they usually don't have the right level of detail or context in the places that they're looking. So for example, you might have DNS logging that's enabled, but might not have the right level of logging. For example, getting answers to DNS queries, the response that a machine's receiving back from a DNS server, and that's information like that is very crucial for finding these types of attacks. And then to make matters a little bit worse, increasingly we're seeing, further privacy protection on the net and more encryption, and DNS is also an area where encryption is becoming more common with standards like DNS over TLS or DNS over HTTPS. As those are more broadly adopted, our visibility is further limited, which makes DNS an even more attractive target for attackers. So, again, I'm talking about DNS here, but a lot of this applies to other protocols as well. SMB, SSH, HTTP, SMTP. How good is your visibility into all of that traffic that's happening on your network? A couple questions to consider here. Are your logs informative enough? So when we look at legacy data sources that only provide a high-level summary of the connection, they lack essential security details, things like what was the connection state and history. Are you able to correlate insight across different log files? So if an attack takes place across multiple protocols, are you able to stitch together those different pieces, connect the dots, see the whole story of what really happened, and then also be able to pivot from one piece of data to the next? Can you quickly drill down into the relevant PCAP? So once you found something, can you then go and find the associated PCAP? And can you do that quickly? So just as we need to, as analysts, need to pivot from log to log, we also need to be able to pivot from a suspicious event in a log down into the exact record of what happened on the network. And this can be time-consuming, or even impossible if you don't have the right tools. And then can you get detailed insight from those sources, such as seeing, do the server and the requester IPs, are they safe? Are the requests running on standard ports? Are the byte patterns, the packet sizes, is the volume of traffic reasonable for DNS? Or is someone shoving large amounts of data, exfiltrating data, out the front door? So now that we've looked at some of the challenges of gaining visibility into DNS and other traffic, I'll go ahead and hand the mic back, or I'll hand the mic over to Gordon to cover the next section.
All right, thanks very much, Ed. Okay, I think we'll take a poll question right now. And the poll question we have here for you to answer is, do you carefully monitor common network traffic like DNS for potential breaches, command and control, or data exfiltration? Yeah, so what we'll start off with is some of the approaches to help address a lot of the challenges that that were talked about by both Michael and Ed. So we'll start off with what you can sort of look at it as kind of three pillars that we can have a solution riding on top of. The first of it is the ability to get visibility into all of the actual traffic that's within your network. So right across the entire network, get access to every single piece of traffic that you need to get access to be able to get adequate visibility into what's going on in the network. Then there's the next pillar, which is really about, okay, now I've got this visibility, how do I actually get sort of insights and deeper visibility into what's going on concerning the security that you can actually see within the traffic. And then the third pillar is about now you've got all this access to all of this network-wide traffic, be able to get much deeper forensic evidence that can actually be provided. And as you can see with this, and extracted, I should say, and as you can see with these three pillars, the first pillar is really provided by Gigamon, where Gigamon provides an entire visibility and analytics fabric. The second pillar is provided by Corelight with their sensors. And the third pillar is provided by Endace with their analytics platforms. So the three pillars together really give you a really solid and strong, robust solution. And the business benefits are fairly straightforward. You know, it helps you streamline and simplify what you're trying to do in terms of looking at all the network traffic, be able to monitor it, be able to secure it, and even more importantly, be able to get some deep forensics into what's going on. And then the effort that you require in a SecOps or an InfoSec organization to be able to respond to an incident, that amount of effort is greatly reduced by this type of solution, because it's going to allow now for your team to spend a lot more time investigating what's going on with the incidents, and you'll have a lot more access to information, much deeper and broader sets of information to be able to dig into what's happened with the incidents and resolve them in far shorter time periods. And then, you know, networks are never static. They're always changing. There's digital transformation going on, moving, and sometimes moving into the cloud and sometimes moving things back to the cloud. It just depends on how your organization changes. So you need to have a solution that's very dynamic, very flexible. And while things change, you actually don't want to lose your visibility, and you don't want to lose your not just the visibility into the network, but the visibility into the traffic and what's going on in terms of the secureness of it, and looking for malicious bad actors. And then finally, as was mentioned earlier, was about the problems of alert fatigue and tool fatigue. So the ability to reduce that's a really huge factor. Right, I think we're going to do another poll question here. So the question is, do you feel your security tools have sufficient visibility and work together enough to give you the coverage and depth of insight for hidden security threats? All right, so this is about what Gigamon can provide. And Gigamon's all about ensuring that customers can run fast, stay secure, and continue to innovate within their organization and their operations. So we'll go into a little bit of the history in a way. So if you look at the legacy approaches to obtain visibility in a network, what was done was you had some sort of spanning or mirroring functions on various devices in the network. You'd have so maybe some taps, some very simple passive taps would be put into the network to get access to traffic. You may rely on some other sources to get information about what's going on in the network. The problem, though, of course, now you've got different types of monitoring applications you're going to be using in your network. You may be looking for certain types of threats or certain types of traffic that had threats in them, and some tools are better tailored for looking for certain things and in certain types of traffic than others. And you've probably got other monitoring needs as well, such as checking, making sure your operations and performance are going on very well with your applications and network. So the big contention of being, how do all of those devices get access to copies of that traffic? How do they get access to all the various points in the network that you need to see the traffic and get a holistic view of what's going on? And then there's the problems of all the various different types of network speeds. In say 10, 20 years ago, it was all about 100 meg and 1 gig, and then it rapidly changed into 10 gig, then became 40 gig, then it's 25 gig that popped up, and now 100 gig, and people are now even looking at 400 gig. So you need a solution that can actually bring all that together, and allowing your tools to be able to see across that is very difficult. So we'll just dig into a little bit about what some of the components of a Gigamon visibility and analytics fabric can do. This is specifically showing one type of node, and you can actually cluster a number of nodes together, provide a sort of a virtual node that covers a very broad expanse of a network and multiple networks. In this case, what we're showing is a product that can actually be put either inline in the network or even take passive out-of-band feeds from span ports or passive taps. So get copies of the network traffic in. And we can feed then both passive out-of-band tools, such as some of the devices we're talking about today, or we can be feeding inline devices as well, such as IPSs and web application firewalls. So those types of devices, we can sort out the traffic, send what's needed to each of those devices, and only the type of traffic that they need to inspect. And so therefore reduce the load of irrelevant traffic that needs to be sent to those devices. And that makes them a lot more effective and allows you as a user, so an InfoSec user, to get the most effectiveness out of the devices and efficiency that you're using to secure your network. It's also able to decrypt inside the device. It's got an SSL decryption function that supports everything up to TLS 1.3, and so that allows you to get access to the clear text versions of the traffic. We talked about DNS earlier. Both Ed and Mike talked about DNS, that it's quite often obfuscated by the encryption, and that allows attackers to get in and hijack the encryption capabilities within the network and hide the fact that they're doing what they're doing. So by doing this decryption and forwarding the decrypted traffic off to the devices, we can now allow them to see everything that's inside the traffic and expose those bad actors. So I'm not going to go through all the steps in this slide, but you can see the various steps that you can go through, whether it's aggregation, sorting out the traffic using filtering, ensuring that the inline tools are operating properly, spreading the load of traffic if it's too much for one instance of a particular tool, spreading the load across multiple instances. I talked about the ability to decrypt TLS or SSL, and manage all that within under one single user interface. So that's a device that can be used in the physical world. And we also have similar solutions that will run in a virtual space. Now, whether it's in a public network, so with digital transformation, a lot of applications are moving more into the public domain. But it's also the fact that even on-prem types of installations, instead of having a monolithic, very, very fixed hardware type of installation or infrastructure, moving those even into a private cloud and hosting them in a virtual environment there, whether it's VMware or Nutanix or even OpenStack or something like that. But being able to get access to the traffic inside those environments, in particular when applications are talking to each other and the traffic never comes out onto the wire, it's very important to be able to see into that and get access to that. So just like we talked about on the previous slide, we have similar equivalent solutions that run within the virtual environment as well. And all of that, the virtual and the physical, will all be managed from a single pane of glass. I won't spend much time on this, but this is just we talked about the ability to sort out traffic and filter. So with the Gigamon solution, you don't have to just rely on outer layer type, so layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, IP layer type of a network layer type of information to sort traffic out. But we can also detect specific applications. So if you know that there's certain traffic that you're not going to have, you don't care about because it's sort of crossing a network, or it's not of concern, you can ignore that traffic altogether. Or if there's certain ones that you know certain tools need to focus in on, then you can actually send those applications just to those tools only. So that's one of our huge strengths. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's a good list here to go through. You know, does your team have any of these specific pain points? And if you answer yes to any of these, then you certainly need a visibility and analytics fabric that we can offer from Gigamon. All right then, so I will now hand off to my next learned friend, which I believe is probably Ed.
Yes, thank you, Gordon. So now I'd like to talk specifically about Corelight's role in the solution, how we take that broad visibility from Gigamon that Gordon just talked about, analyze and enrich that data, and deliver it and integrate it with Endace and other tools that you might have in your security stack. So at Corelight, we consider ourselves to be an open NDR platform, and NDR is in network detection and response. So if you're familiar with EDR solutions, you can think of us like an EDR, but for the network. So we watch what's happening on the network as opposed to the endpoint and find things that, might be bad. And then we take that data and we send it to other tools for analysis, typically a SIM. And that data consists of 3 parts. The first part are Zeek logs. So Zeek is an open source tool. It's been around a while. You may have known or heard of it before as a tool called Bro. So at Corelight, we're actually a company that was founded by the creators and maintainers of that tool, of Zeek. But nowadays, we do much more than just Zeek as a company, which I'll talk about in a second. The great thing about Zeek is that when a security alert fires or you have some sort of network problem to investigate, Zeek provides really rich, very useful logs that help you find the problem and help you find it faster compared to alternative tools. And what Zeek does is extracts over 400 fields of data in real time directly from network traffic. It covers dozens of data types and protocols from layer 3 up to layer 7, including TCP connections, SSL certificates, HTTP traffic, emails, DHCP, and a whole lot more. What's interesting with these logs is that these Zeek logs are structured and interconnected in a way that really helps threat hunters and incident responders be more efficient and be more effective. So that's the first part. The second part are extracted files. So with our Corelight sensors, we will watch the wire for any files that are being transferred, reassemble them, save them to disk or save them to an S3 bucket. We'll deduplicate any files that we've seen before. And we can do this for very high rates of data. So great feature, great tool to have when you want to quickly get a copy of some suspicious file that was transferred over the network. Grab that file for your investigation. And then number 3 are security insights. So in addition to those Zeek logs, we now also provide Suricata alerts. Suricata, if you're not familiar with it, it's another open source tool focused on IDS, very, very similar to Snort and SourceFire. But we now have that detection capability built into our sensors. And then even on top of that, we have a research team at Corelight that is focused on creating custom detection packages as well. And to give you kind of a snapshot of what that looks like, here's a slide that kind of goes over some of those custom detections that we offer. And one thing I'll note is at Corelight, we don't do any type of decryption. However, if you have us connected to a tool like Gigamon, and as Gordon was describing, that can do that decryption, we'll happily take in that traffic and provide visibility with those logs, with those files, and with those security insights. And then in places where it's just not feasible to decrypt, maybe there's technical, privacy, or legal issues. Even if they're still dealing with that encrypted traffic, Corelight can still provide critical insights into that traffic, doing things like fingerprinting SSL and SSH connections to help you find known malware, monitoring for custom encryption, suspicious SSL certs, being able to see within, for example, an SSH connection. So if you have an SSH connection, is this an automated script that's communicated over that connection? Is there some keystroke activity going on that would signify that you have someone with hands-on keyboard access to that machine? These are the types of insights that we can provide. And then you'll see the note there in red that we've recently expanded these insights in our version 19 release, providing additional insights into SSH as well as encrypted DNS traffic. So Corelight gives you rich logs, those extracted files, the security insights. And here's how it works. Here's how you deploy us. So we have physical and non-physical appliances. With the non-physical appliances, we have a cloud sensor, so you can deploy us in AWS, Azure, GCP, as well as a virtual and software form factor. These are great options for this solution, by the way, because they can actually run on the Endace hardware. For the physical appliances, we have 3 sizes based on throughput that you can choose from. And then to manage the appliances, that can be done individually via a web interface. We also have a fleet manager for managing the entire fleet via a web UI as well. And then to wrap up my section here, I just wanted to share a couple of quotes from our customers. The first is a security engineer at one of the world's largest energy companies. They found Corelight through their prior experience using Zeek. The engineer had worked on an agile security engineering team within the organization's security operations center and managed network forensics across multiple regional offices. And the quote was, "If I didn't have this data, I wouldn't sleep well at night. I like to sleep well at night." I think that's a great quote. I think we all like to sleep well at night. And the second quote is from a law firm that wanted a threat hunting solution based on network traffic analysis, something that could provide real-time, comprehensive insight. And they had traffic spanning multiple data centers and satellite offices all around the world. And collectively, we're seeing throughput speeds up to 6 gigabits per second. And the quote from them was, "Corelight takes care of it for us and has given us more bandwidth to threat hunt." I think that's a lot. That's the goal for a lot of organizations, is kind of being able to move into that mode where you're actually actively hunting for threats as opposed to just reactively responding to incidents. And then finally, after deploying our sensors, we had a security team at a global educational services organization. They saw incredible impact. Their average incident response time dropped from hours down to minutes, thanks to the network logs that Zeek and Corelight was providing them. It allowed them to make lightning fast sense of their traffic. And their quote was, with Corelight, the ability to track lateral movement in your network skyrockets. So a couple of interesting examples I wanted to share there. And then with that, I will hand the mic back to Michael.
Thanks, Ed. And ultimately, where we tie this all up together and really make the compelling difference for you as a SecOps team is getting that visibility from Gigamon across your network, getting those tremendous insights from the analysis and the log information that Corelight can create, to the ultimate forensics in the full packet network history. So how to think of Endace is really, it's like your black box flight recorder for your network. It's the ultimate capture of everything going on, and keeping it long enough to give you that time to fully investigate. Imagine a investigation team trying to investigate why a plane crashed without having the time to look at all the details of the forensics that happened, the weather, the dynamics of the plane, the electrical. It's the same scenario except for your network. And one of the keys that really Endace provides is it's a tamper-proof evidence store. Many malware and threat signatures nowadays, they have various wipers to look for system logs, event logs, and really wipe and cover the tracks. Authentication logs is another example, to hide what's happening in the ransomware execution or in the malware execution. And so being able to have that kind of hidden tamper-proof forensics is a real differentiator. And ultimately, being able to tie that information from the insights that Corelight has given to the full raw data to let you look farther back in time or broader across your network really becomes crucial for elevating your team to that threat hunting level and being able to make those connections around indicators of compromise and indicators of attack. So how does this improve your incident response? Well, first of all, full packet data, as many of you know, can be hard to look through. But if you can do it in the context of drilling down from other tools and systems you already have in place, from the insights that Corelight is giving you, and being able to look before, during, and after the specific event, so you're not searching randomly for evidence, you're doing in-context searching, makes a huge difference. And it really can accelerate an investigation time from days or hours, literally down to minutes. And we preserve those evidence of actual communications between systems, downloads, uploads in either direction. Having that full packet data of the attachments that may or may not have been carved out with some of your other tools enables you to go back and have that information and be able to see things like threat spread, port scanning, and user credentials that might have been part of the compromising attack. What are some examples of incidents that we can specifically really help accelerate the incident response around? Ed mentioned it with lateral movement for Corelight, and again, it's just tremendously complementary of being able to get the insights of what might be happening with the complete raw forensics. Really, lateral movement is now a thing of the past in terms of not being able to see it if you have the combination of Corelight and Endace. Data exfiltration, though, is another perfect example. More and more malware today is implementing low and slow data extraction. When you look at like the Sony event, there was literally terabytes of data transferred out of their network over months of time. And so you need to be able to have that window of evidence to look at payloads and be able to reconstruct all what was taken and what was in those packets. So that's another ideal example. And again, because of the more commonality of low and slow extraction, can really be a huge differentiator. And then again, Ed mentioned another scenario, command and control. More and more malware kicks off connections to unknown foreign hosts. And again, it may be masked in very common types of traffic like DNS, like email, just HTTP, very common traffic protocols, but being able to see directionally the traffic flows and what hosts are going to, and if there's other hosts connecting to that same unknown external host, again, allows you to make those connections much quicker and solve incidents much faster. Really, again, completing that puzzle and completing the picture for you. So what does the Endace probe and how does it operate? Well, first of all, again, we're being fed data directly from the Gigamon network packet brokers. We're recording at 100% line rate with absolutely zero loss, keeping that data for as long as the appliance allows. And typically most of our customers want at least 2 weeks worth of look back. Many of them nowadays are asking for even up to 30 days, 60 days, and some even 90 days worth of look back. We're keeping that. Our key differentiator is the speed and scale at which we can capture, store, and search it. So it's one thing to record it to your system, but it's another thing to then be able to look through potentially petabytes of network traffic and be able to find all the conversational activity happening to a single host in a specific time window. So that search is really one of our key differentiators. The second thing then is we can allow third-party tools like the Corelight software sensor to run on our platform. So as we're recording the traffic to disk, we can be streaming it in real time for them to be inspecting it, analyzing it, and generating the rich, meaningful metadata and log data that they can generate to provide and feed your SIMs or your data lakes or wherever else you might be looking at that information. And we can even play back that. So let's say you have a 0-day update and you update all your security tools for the latest threat. We can then look back the last week's worth of traffic, for example, replay that through any sensors or IDSs that you might have in your environment and allow you to make sure you weren't infected by that potential 0-day threat. And then the third thing, again, as we've talked through, is being able to get to this information quickly and easily from other tools you might already have. So many of you probably have various SIMs in your environment, whether it's Splunk or IBM QRadar or Elastic, whatever it might be for your SIM environment. Being able to get down from those platforms in context of the incident and the alert that you're looking at, and seeing the data not only after the event, but before the event and what led up to it. So you can see some of those things like lateral movement real quickly. Really helps you speed the investigation. So with that, why don't I hand it back to Gordon to get us kicked off on how we walk through and solve that real DNS threat we talked about at the very beginning. So Gordon?
All right, I think we're going to do a third poll question here. And this one's got a few choices for you to select from. So the question is, or the action is, choose one area of your security stack you feel you could benefit the most from to further your investment in. So the first choice is edge firewall, or IDS, IPS. The second choice, B, is network visibility platform access across my entire network to get the right data to the right tools efficiently. The third choice, C, is NDR, in other words, network detection and response tools. And the fourth one is D, enterprise-wide network history and forensics. So if we take Gigamon, what we can provide as part of the solution, it sort of starts off from the very beginning. Whether the networks that you need to access the traffic from are physical, or whether they're virtual, or whether they're containerized in some manner, whether they're public or private in the cloud, it really doesn't matter. We can get access to the traffic from any of those environments, and then as the traffic comes in, we can then process it. We can aggregate it together. We can sort it out from a filtering perspective, which may, as an example, include sorting out whether it's DNS traffic or over-the-top video traffic, and then transform it. And transforming, a perfect example here that we've talked about is to be able to decrypt the traffic. And then once we've done that, then we can actually forward that traffic across to both the Corelight and Endace devices. And whether it's a physical or virtual environment with sort of devices, virtual or physical devices in those environments, we can manage all of those from a single pane of glass. And so a user doesn't have to think specifically down on one device or another. It's actually one user interface that you configure to get the traffic from wherever you need to get it from, and then pass it off to Corelight and Endace. And so with that, I'll hand the next step over to Ed.
Yeah, awesome. So you know, on the far right of the diagram, we saw kind of an analytics stack. You know, where we're sending all this great visibility, analytics, and kind of you know, flight recorder information of what's happened on the network into, as Michael mentioned, whatever analytics solution you want. If it's Splunk, if it's Elastic, IBM QRadar. I just want to provide an example here of what some of the Corelight data would look like inside of Splunk. So in here we have a screenshot. This is the Corelight app for Splunk. Since we're talking about DNS today, I wanted to show, you know, what does some of this data look like inside of Splunk. So here we're seeing a breakdown of what type of DNS queries am I seeing on the network. What domains are seeing a high number of queries? So do I have a lot of you know, traffic going out to some suspicious domains, or are we seeing any queries to domains that just don't exist? So these are potential indicators of you know, malware and command and control that are occurring on your network, and presented in a, you know, very easy to understand interface in your analytics solution, in this case Splunk. So we'll go to the next slide here. I had another example that I wanted to show, you know, comparing Corelight data, the data that's coming from the Zeek logs versus other data sources. And let's see if we can go back a couple slides here. There we go. So in this case, we see a standard DNS log, standard DNS server log at the top of the screen there, being compared with a Corelight enhanced Zeek log. So what's different in this example? And we've color coded some of the differences here. So in red, we see a microsecond timestamp. So useful for understanding exactly when did this event happen. And that's important for when we're wanting to, correlate with other data sources and other events that we're seeing. What happened, at that time or right before, or right after that. If there's any mismatch here, so if there's any inaccuracies or a lack of precision across multiple data sources, that can be a problem. But we have it down to a microsecond timestamp for that reason. In green, we see the connection unique ID, the unique identifier, or UID. And this lets a SecOps analyst quickly pivot from one Corelight log to another, and not only useful in terms of analyzing, researching very quickly, but also just avoiding running into a dead end where there's not a good next data source to look at. And I'll show another example of that in a second. And in blue, we see the 5-tuple call record. So what IP talked to which IP over what ports and what protocol, and then in yellow, the round trip time. And then finally in purple, what was the content of the response? So I think this is really important. The other log only shows us the question, while the enhanced log from Corelight is not only showing us the question, but then also showing us the answer to that DNS query. And then on this screen, again, we're back in our analytics tool, and here's where we see that unique identifier in action. So we have several network events that are shown here, but they all have the same UID. So as an analyst, I can stitch these events together across logs and across protocols to see the broader story of what happened. And then hand it back to Michael to go lead us on the next slide.
Yeah, and ultimately, again, sticking in Splunk here to make the story, flow completely. Now that you've got all that information and insights that Corelight has provided, ultimately your analyst wants to drill down to specific details around an event in that series of activities and indicators that they've just looked through. So similarly, as Corelight has a Splunk app, Endace has a Splunk app on Splunkbase as well, where in your Splunk Enterprise or Enterprise Security, you can then pivot from any event that you're working in Splunk to do a full network-wide search across your Endace probes to say, show me all the data that was happening tied to that event. Show me what was happening just before, during, and after that. And that ultimate network history is where the Corelight Zeek feeds that are being fed to Splunk can then enable that Splunk analyst to drill down and do that quick search. And again, in Splunk, trying to keep things simple for them, they can adjust the parameters. But again, taking that 5-tuple that Ed talked about, being able to zoom in on it around that event, maybe you want to customize it a little, maybe you want a slightly lighter window. Or maybe you want to pull the PCAP directly here into your to your Splunk desktop. You can do that all directly, where it'll search the Endace probes, and this could be literally hundreds of probes, or it could just be a few probes. But being able to search everywhere across your network for that evidence super quickly really enables them to get to that. But maybe they want to look and get a little more insights to the traffic, right? So again, we've been focusing a lot of the conversation about DNS, and DNS is typically a very low volume traffic compared to other things like HTTP in this diagram. And so being able to tell what else was happening in terms of packet protocols during that time window, being able to see the conversation history of specific IP addresses and the directional flow of the data that might have been leaving or connecting to and from the network. So again, if it's a C2 scenario or a data exfiltration scenario, being able to see the amount of bits and bytes transferred, and in the directional in the direction of which those traffics were flowing, really can speed that analyst to understand what was going on. And then ultimately, again, solving their problem quickly is being able to open up a Wireshark window right here on the Endace probe and let them look at the raw PCAP data. And in this specific example, again, we focused in on DNS. We can see in the DNS request specifically a suspect, and sorry, the window is so small here to see it, but basically this is a bogus DNS host with malformed names, and it's sending requests and getting data transfers to and from inside this infrastructure. So in a matter of 2 clicks, we've come from having all the data in across my network being fed to critical tools like Corelight and Endace from Gigamon, and we're able to filter through that information with the insights that Corelight can do, and providing the rich metadata and log information. And then ultimately from the SIM that you've already got deployed, being able to drill down quickly to the unalterable full packet data to really see the raw evidence that was happening in this specific DNS threat. So in conclusion, things to take away from it. In order to see these really complex advanced threats and to be able to solve these problems quickly, it's our provocation to you that really you need to have 3 fundamental components. You need to have that network-wide visibility and the brokering of the right information to the right tools, which Gigamon can supply. You need to have that advanced network detection and response that Corelight can offer to be able to filter and analyze the traffic and make real meaningful sense of the data and get that information to your other tools, your other SIMs like Splunk or Elastic or wherever you might be managing your environment. And then ultimately having that unalterable network forensics of Endace in the full packet data, where you can drill down in context to really get to the root cause of a problem quickly. And we believe these are the foundations to really improve and elevate your security posture and move your security teams from a more reactive to a proactive threat hunting, ultimately reducing your SOC workloads and absolutely speeding your investigation times. So with that, that wraps up all of our content. I think I'll turn it back to Tom for any questions.
Beautiful, Michael, thank you. And I want to thank Ed and Gordon as well for your time, your insight, wonderful presentation. As you say, we have the opportunity to take questions now. I know some questions have come in, but for attendees that haven't done so, you still can submit questions via the chat window that you see on your screen. Might not be able to get to every question today, but for those that we can answer in the course of this session, we'll get a response back to you via email. So gentlemen, first question I have for you. Does this solution work across all my physical, virtual, and cloud environments?
I guess I'll take that one. Thanks, Tom. Yes, it certainly does. As I described earlier on in the presentation, the Gigamon Visibility and Analytics Fabric allows you to get access to all of the traffic wherever you need to get access to it. It doesn't matter whether it's a physical network, it doesn't matter whether it's copper or fiber, and it doesn't matter whether it's a virtual or containerized even type of network infrastructure in the public or a private on-prem type of scenario.
And I've got a couple of questions here that I think are tailored for you. And the first is, what are the size of data collected by Corelight? Is there a way to estimate that?
Yeah, so with Corelight sensors and the Zclogs that we're creating, the size is based on the aggregate network traffic, so the bandwidth that we're seeing on the wire. So, once we have that, we're extracting rich metadata, the files, the security insight. So really, approximately that comes down to an output of 1% or less of overall aggregate bandwidth. So for example, if you have 1 gig of traffic, that's 1,000 megs. So the output of that would be about 10 megs of data.
And a follow-up, does Corelight offer any sort of dedupe or compression techniques for Zeek output data?
Yes, yeah. So there's a lot of data overlap in the log files. So for example, a connection log that may be sent over and over again as the connection persists. So we could take take the duplicate data out of those and then just send the metadata that's really needed over to update that log file. So on average, that comes out to be about a 30% reduction in log files, which can be important if the analytics solution that you're using charges on data ingest. This is one way to kind of help save on amount of data that you're pumping in there.
Another question, gentlemen. What's the typical amount of network history look back time that you recommend?
Yeah, no, I'll take that one, Tom. Many of our customers that want full packet network history, they're typically wanting at least a week, if not 2 weeks of look back. But more and more, because of the length and the complexity of many security threats and the dwell time, right? Statistics are showing dwell times of malware inside environments is, I think it's up around 200 days. I mean, a tremendously long time. We're getting more and more requests for people wanting at least 30 days. We have some customers even wanting 60 and 90. But ultimately, it's a function of your network volumes, the number of interfaces you want, and really kind of your specific environment of how much time you need to give your SecOps team. So if they're overwhelmed, you may need to give them a little bit longer window. But that's really the benefit of this combined solution, is really enabling them to get through things quicker, but also giving them that time to investigate things thoroughly and with the absolute correct evidence to solve that issue.
Gentlemen, just a couple more questions before we wrap up here. And one is, how does the solution allow full visibility into encrypted traffic?
Yeah, well, I'll take that one first. Maybe one of the other guys would like to chip in as well. But yeah, first off, once you've got access to the traffic, and it doesn't matter whether it's TLS encrypted using TLS 1.3, the latest standard, the visibility and analytics fabric that's available from Gigamon is able to provide that level of decryption. And if there's certain traffic that shouldn't be decrypted, it can actually be configured not to decrypt those types of traffic, that type of traffic as well. But yeah, it can provide full visibility on even perfect forward secrecy type of encryption methods.
And I'll jump in on the end of that answer there too, and point out as Gordon mentioned, their tools can do that decryption, and we can take that data and no problem provide you the same level of insights. But then, as Gordon mentioned, sometimes there's just times where decryption isn't really feasible, and we have detections that will still provide insights into that traffic even without decrypting it. And so one of the comparisons we talk about at Corelight is the idea of a Christmas present or a birthday present, or a Christmas present sitting under the tree. You can kind of pick it up and shake it and feel how heavy it is, and you kind of get a good idea of what's going on, even though you're not ripping open the package to see what's inside. So I think there's still a lot of visibility that you can get even in situations where decrypting traffic isn't feasible.
Great. One last question I have for you. In terms of monitoring, can the solution allow me to focus in on or exclude specific traffic types, for example, OTT video?
Yeah, definitely. I'll take that one as well. Yeah, so if you want to specifically weed out certain types of applications that are not important to you, that you don't see as threat carrying type of traffic, then yes, you can certainly do that right up at the application level within the Gigamon Visibility and Analytics Fabric. We can also sort out even at the lower layer and at the application layer. I know this presentation's talked a lot about DNS as an example. So if DNS is really of concern, then we can really focus in on the DNS and make sure that the tools that you're using to analyze DNS from a security perspective only gets DNS, so that we can take that action as well.
Yeah, and if I could chime in, Tom, one extra comment. That's one way Gigamon and Endace work really well together. We've had a number of customers want to basically extend their look-back capacity and extend their ability to store more PCAP data. And so what they're doing is setting up so all those very common, OTT traffic, YouTube traffic, things that are not, going to be full of the threats, just ignore that, and that just takes the volumes of traffic off the network. And then what we're capturing then is the more sensitive, rich information that could be corrupted or infected.
Very good. Gentlemen, that's all the time we have for questions today. Again, I want to thank each of you, Michael, Ed, Gordon, for your time, for your insight, for this presentation, but also thanks for taking time to answer these questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.